we stopped to meet one of our friends that we had had from, a couple years before. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean, what are we doing?" We lived in Harrisburg at the time. He said, "What are you doing? You got out. These people can't get out of here. They're stuck here. You got out. You got a degree. You got an education. Why are you even considering coming back?"
Welcome to the PM Podcast, brought to you by DonorSearch, the show that takes you inside the lives of thought leaders, innovators, and changemakers in fundraising, philanthropy, and civil society. I'm your host, Jay Frost. Bill TeDesco is the founder of DonorSearch, the leading provider of fundraising intelligence solutions for the nonprofit world. Raised in Pennsylvania, he studied landscape architecture and then earned a Master of Public Administration from Penn State before beginning his career in technology and then moving into key development role at the Fund for Educational Excellence and later the University of Maryland School of Medicine. He went on to serve as Executive Vice President at Target America and CEO of WealthEngine before launching DonorSearch in 2007. In this episode, we explore his journey from school days to frontline fundraising to technology leadership, the lessons he's learned along the way, and his vision for the future of the field.
Our grandson has taken to the horses. We've gone out of our way to put him in front of horses, and he's grabbed a hold of it. It's Sarah sent us a little thing with him we gave him a rocking horse, right? And you squeeze the ear and it's like, "Yahoo, go ahead, cowboy." And then he's got a little cowboy hat, and he digs it. He likes it. So I use that as context for we've been thinking about a mini for him.
Really?
Wouldn't that be a hoot?
That would be amazing.
Yeah. We had somebody come visit us. They were taking minis from one location in Connecticut down to a new place they're living in North Carolina. And they're adorable, but they're also pretty hardy because it's a horse. It's got everything associated with a horse, but in a really small package, right? So we'll see if we do it. It might just be, here's something I bet you never thought of, is it's not really wise to buy a pony because your children outgrow it.
Oh.
And it's that they actually, you can lease them, and then they move from one family to the next.
You can lease a pony?
Yes, you can.
How long do ponies live?
They live a really long time. You know who lives longer? Donkeys.
Wow.
Donkeys can live 80 years.
Maybe that's why that donkey's years expression came from. I had no idea.
I'd never heard that.
All right. So, Bill, I've got to ask you, when you were growing up,
yes,
did you ever think you'd be riding horses, owning horses, or talking about miniature horses?
No. I like being outside. Every other summer I got to go out to the country. My uncle had a cabin. He didn't have any horses, so I didn't get much interaction with them. I'm going to put this on my wife. She's always wanted a horse, and she grew up in Northeast Philadelphia, and there aren't many horses in Northeast Philadelphia. And there's an interesting story around it, but when we made the move and bought the farm, that was a big deal for her. That was realization of one of those, I think some folks will call it a bucket list, or other folks will call it that, it was almost, it very much was kind of like a lifetime dream. So it was if we can pull it off, let's give it a try. So, and we did.
And she's from North Philadelphia, and you're from?
I am from Pittsburgh.
From Pittsburgh.
I grew up in the suburbs where Pittsburgh, once you get outside the city, well, all of Pittsburgh's hilly, but once you get back about 10 or 15 miles from the city, everything's a hill up, hill down, hill up. So quite literally, I walked a mile to school up and down hills both ways. So yeah, got some disproportionate calves out of it.
And the story to tell your kids, because that's what every parent says, is I walked a mile, through the snow, both uphill, both directions.
It's true. You just need two hills.
What was it like growing up there?
It was good. It was how should I say? What was it like? It was an easy life. I didn't know anything else, obviously. We lived in apartments, rented buildings. My father died when I was young. But we were being raised by a single mom, 3 boys. So she had her she had challenges, right? The good news is we were all raised with pretty strong values, and by example, we all learned that working hard was probably one of the strongest values that you could have. If you've got something to do, just get it done. Don't toy with it. Don't try to skate.
How old were you when you lost your dad?
2.
Wow. Yeah. So you must not, I don't know how some people remember things that young. Most of us don't. I don't. Do you?
Did you lose your dad at a young
No,
age?
no. But people who have, whether they've lost a parent or not, remembering something at that age is rare. Do you have recollections?
Very little. Very little. They said that when I was growing up, I used to look at you going right for the emotions, just like, here, let's take Bill's heart out and put it on the stage. Yeah, I used to tell folks he was coming back. So.
And your mom, what does she do? Because she was a hardworking person, raising 3 boys. What does she do?
She was a nurse, a night nurse, private duty, which means that she could pretty much set her own schedule. She would call into a registry and they would have people who wanted to pay for a private nurse. And she would, I think probably 8 times out of 10, it was in a hospital. Leave for work at 10:30 at night, come home by 7:30.
Wow. And when you're growing up with a parent who is, like you said, kind of setting their own hours, even though you're working for other people, I mean, that's it's very hard work. What kind of impression does that leave for you? I mean, I know my dad was he had his own little cottage business in the back of the house. My mom worked with him, but I saw him working every day. Sort of like you must have seen your mom going off to work and coming back from work. What kind of impression did that give you?
She was going off to do work, and it was our job to support her in that. Make sure she was able to get ready fast enough. Make sure, as we got older, make sure there was gas in the car at the very least. Yeah, and we were obligated to kind of hang into the straight and narrow, if you know what I mean. It was like, now this whole thing falls apart if we don't all pull together.
Yeah. You talked about values a minute ago. So what were those? Was there pretty much like a set of clear values almost that you could write up on a chalkboard in the house?
They'd be idealistic. They'd being honest, working hard. Mm-hmm. Education was a very, very high value with her. Turned out, I think we were attending somebody's funeral, and it was one of the first times that we weren't particularly close to either side of the family. But at the funeral, we realized that we were the only ones that were going to college. And it was like, oh, you learn a little bit about your roots at that moment. So, and it's worked out really well. My eldest brother has a doctorate in geology, worked for Chevron. middle brother has a master's, I think it's public administration. And ironically, I got one too in public administration, which is, it's interesting because we never talked about it. We kind of like found out afterwards. It was like, oh, really? Doing the same thing? So neither one of us, he went further with his degree in public administration. He worked as a township manager. I think that's what it was. Yeah, he was a township manager of a fast growing area out north of Pittsburgh. And I got as far as interviewing for township manager positions. And I was offered a job. I briefly worked in north central Pennsylvania, which is the kind of standing way of understanding it is that there are more deer than people. Yeah, yeah. Any rate, we went up there. I'd been asked to come up for an interview, and we're looking around, and they kind of showed us around, and essentially said that the job was available if we wanted it. And while we were up there, we stopped to meet one of our friends that we had from a couple years before, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean? What are we doing?" We lived in Harrisburg at the time. He said, "What are you doing? You got out. These people can't get out of here. They're stuck here. You got out. You got a degree. You got an education. Why are you even considering coming back?" And Ruth and I had a fairly long ride home in the car. And it was like, yeah, Pat's right. This is Pat Walsh at the time. And we're very grateful. And it's not an accident that our son is named Patrick. So anyway, so I ended up working at the state and bumped into some computer people that liked the work that I did. Got a nice career in computers.
And so you left. I mean, but before you left, this is Penn State for both degrees, but your first degree was landscape architecture, right?
Does that seem unusual to you?
Well, it's an unusual degree for anybody. It's pretty amazing. So what was that all about? You talked about this earlier, and you've told me this separately before today about liking being outside. So yeah. I don't know if that's what this is about or if there's something else.
I also like building stuff. I went to Penn State thinking that I was interested in architecture, but I had no idea that people would be showing up and they'd have portfolios and they'd have their own ideas and maybe they'd had done internships and all that sort of stuff. So I wasn't, the best candidate for the architecture program. And I got a roommate just by chance, and he said, "Hey, and we compared notes, and we both had the same aspirations." And he said, "I got into the landscape architecture program." So I joined the landscape architecture program. Landscape architecture program was fairly severe in terms of its, in the way that it was, how do I describe the way success was teased or offered out? I think we started with like 200 people coming into it. After the first year, it was down to 100. And then after the second year, it was down to 50.
Oh.
And then by the time we were done, we were down to like the last 35. They didn't cut it in half the junior year. And I made it. I made it through it. As it turned out, it was completely locked sequence as well. So I'd gone to school for 1 year before I got into the program, but I had 4 years that were locked after that. So I enjoyed it. It was a good challenge. All the values come out. You have to work real hard. You can't cheat, all that sort of stuff. Plus, it kind of tapped into some sort of technical stuff that I enjoy. Actually, one of the first courses I took at Penn State was a computer course. And it was a really long time ago. So it involved cards, right? But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. So every opportunity I got as I was going through the landscape architecture, I tried to include the computer aspects to it. And then when I got the master's, I had taken, I was, I remember what it was. I wanted to be able to work while I was going to school, just from a money perspective and everything. And I took a job at a township, and I enjoyed that tremendously as well. But that's where I began to make a really earnest sort of transition to computer work. The township I was in was looking to buy a computer system. They said, they gave it to the intern, you figure out which ones we should look at. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every aspect of it. And the guy who eventually ended up winning the business, he offered me a job afterwards. It was pretty cool.
No,
Yeah.
so what in the middle of all this, you must have met your wife, because you mentioned in this other thing when you were talking about interviewing for this town manager position that you were already married. So when did that happen?
Ruth and I met. I think it was the second year of me in landscape architecture. It was the summer after the first year. She's 1 year older than I am, but she had done it in 3 years. So she was on her way out. She had already graduated. We met at that time. We kept in touch, and then we got married very shortly after I got out of school. So, yeah, it was pretty cool.
Is this the first time you went to England too? Because I know you did a project that was kind of a landscape architecture project, right?
Yeah. We the senior year, if you saved your money, in my case, I borrowed the money. You had an opportunity to do the study abroad, and for whatever reason, the program that they had in Portugal or Spain fell through for that year. So they were able to recruit a guy named Bodfin Griffin. It was the landscape architect to the Queen.
Wow.
And he said, well, fine, send over some students. So I think there was 4 or 5 of us that went over, and we weren't housed together. We were all kind of scattered through different rental units, and we'd only bump into each other if we were in the studio trying to do the work. So the joint task that we were supposed to work on, and there were different levels of compliance with that, is they had a village, it was called the Village of Laycock, still there, ancient, like 1200 sort of stuff. And what we were supposed to do is go in and try to figure out, they knew that it was going to be a bit of a tourist attraction. They had an abbey there, and there were a couple other things. And they said, well, give us a design where you can still enjoy the aspects of this old village. And, they'd have, as you imagine, old English buildings with the wood outlining the white sort of plaster and all that.
Right.
Well, the whole
Tudor or something.
That way.
Right.
Okay.
Tudor architecture, I think, something like that. I don't know.
I didn't get in the architecture program. Any rate, so we did a design, and I was a little disappointed. Well, when we did the design, like I said, there were different levels of compliance. Basically, I ended up finishing the project like on my own. And at the time, I was experimenting with developing my own film as well as my own photos and stuff.
Oh.
Broke as a church mouse. I mean, just no money. So I screwed it up. I came back with these photos of the plans that we had designed, ready to explain them to everybody else. But if you remember how film works, you have to wash it to get it to a certain level where it's good for making prints. Well, I didn't do that part quite right. So like half of the image was shot. At any rate, I did share with you that I went back to England. I've been back twice. This would be the second time. And they just ignored everything we recommended, everything, which was disappointing, I have to admit. But the local people got to choose, and they did not want all these extra things just for folks that were coming in as tourists. So as a tourist, it was this third time I'd been to England. It was a pretty mediocre experience. They were successful. Congratulations. So, which is in direct contrast. I had done something in my junior year, and this one just kind of blew me away. I had, in the town I lived in Pittsburgh, Crafton, I was able to get shots of the whole little town, and then I was able to get blueprints for it. Everything is paper at that point. And I came up with an idea. We were asked to come up with an idea, design something. And I came up with a design as to where the opportunities were for redeveloping that downtown. And mine was very, very basic. It was like, look for the stuff that was appraised at the lowest cost per square foot. So I was looking at all the cheap lots, basically, is what it came down to. Some were in the middle of houses, others were a little bit more rural. And so what I did is I made recommendations for each of the, I think it was like 20 different plots of ground, including there was a train track that went through the middle. I thought, wouldn't that be great if that was a commuter route all the way into the city? Ultimately, when I went back, it turned out it became a commuter route. They had put a bus line through there. They'd ripped out all the tracks. To my chagrin, literally every plot of ground that I had designed or suggested that they change, they had followed it. And it was like, I didn't even remember where I left the plans. And I thought, well, this is absurd. This isn't real. But I basically systematically went through each of the different plots. And in one place, I was actually changing the street layout. And they changed the street layout. And it was like, you guys realize you were following a 20-year-old who had never designed anything at this level before? And plus the common denominator was the lowest cost per plot, right? For the land, X number of dollars per square foot, that sort of thing. That was a big surprise. I didn't see that one coming. I still, to this date, have no idea how it happened. So
I'm just imagining what that must feel like on two levels. First, to see what you've designed come to fruition and still standing a good number of years later. But then the other part is to be one of the few people who realize that you did that. Because it's not like there's a big plaque somewhere that says Bill TeDesco designed this, right?
There's no plaque. I have no idea. I don't remember where I left the plans. I think it was like the mayor got a hold of them or some real estate developer got a hold of them, and they just followed to the letter. And if they got any pushback, they must have held the plans up and say, well, see here, we got plans, because it was, right down to the densities. Like, this should be multifamily. This should be a high rise. This should be single family. You should tear this building down and put this up there. The stuff all happened. So kind of wild.
And then to be aware that you did it, but other people are not aware of it. What does that feel like?
I haven't been home enough. It just feels good. Feels good. It's like, obviously I could see the things that I would do differently in hindsight. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to kind of have that impact. If you want to make a segue to the business, I know we've had an impact. It's kind of silly when you think of some of the basic algebra that was done to make recommendations. But the recommendations turned out pretty well.
Yeah, it's it's funny that you say that because I'm sure you're right. But when you began this part of the chapter of your life that you're talking about, you were talking about using computers and using, I guess punch cards or whatever people would call them for Fortran, maybe for something like that, to do computer programming. And then you ended up working. Was it NCR? I'm trying to remember.
It was NCR. NCR gave me all the technical background on computers and, like literally what's an operating system, what's memory, what's disk, all that sort of thing. And then you had to tell people about it. When I got, after maybe the first 5 or 10 years in doing prospect research sort of stuff, mm-hmm. I wondered what it was in my background that seemed to fit. And what it was the computer knowledge, which is way over here. Mm-hmm. And then it was the landscape architecture stuff over here. And with landscape architecture, at least during that time frame, what you were doing is you were going out and getting a soil map. You were going out and getting a topology map. You were going out and getting a utility map. You were going out and getting a vegetation map. And you'd lay those all on top of each other. And then what would pop would be the places where the ideal place for building would be something that was flat. It would be something that, you wouldn't have to cut down a lot of trees for. It would be, maybe something with a good view, all that sort. But in many regards, that's very similar to what we ended up doing with prospect research, because we were stacking business affiliations. We were stacking real estate. We were stacking charitable gifts, political gifts. We were stacking foundation affiliations, things that were definitely markers. And what you're looking for is where you have multiple markers in a given prospect. So there was a reasonable transition, or not transition, the two different career paths kind of merged on this. Worked out nice too. Nice.
And how did you make that transition though from working at NCR computers, sales, et cetera, and then into development? Because that, even though I can see exactly what you described, making that career switch is something that's maybe a little more unusual.
The career switch was pretty painful. What happened is I was working for direct manufacturers. If you look now, there are not that many direct manufacturers. Then back then, they were all purporting, my proprietary system is better than your proprietary system. What happened is, as PCs and networks began to overtake the minis, then that whole part of the direct manufacturer sales disappeared. And then it started to move up into the mid-size and some of the larger systems. And what happened is that part of the sales channel just collapsed. Just one day we were selling to stores, or one day we were selling directly to clients. The next day, it was considered very innovative that we were selling to stores that were reselling our product. And then a year later, it was all gone. And it was tough. I got depressed for about a year. I mean, it was a really long time. But gave me some quality time with the kids. That was good.
Oh, so by that time you'd already had your two children. Okay.
Pat and Sarah. And then my wife said, "You ought to try this development thing." I said, "What?" This development thing. It says, "Your whole process at work is very similar to what I do in development." And never to be spoken again, the similarities between sales and development, right? Any rate, it turned out she was right. And I did some internships where I didn't get paid, and I traveled, I think I was traveling to Northern Virginia 3 days a week on my own dime.
Oh,
And at any rate, I found somebody who took a chance. They had never had a development officer. They said, well, you can be the development officer. I was very fortunate. The board members were salespeople, business people. So they appreciated the skill sets that I did have. And I did that for 3 years. Then I went to University of Maryland. University of Maryland was pretty intense for me. Excuse me, long and short is I lasted a year or so there. And then I was matched up with a guy who was doing prospect research. What he was doing was marketing research. The way I kind of converted it for him, I converted it into more prospect research. And his technology was just a hair ahead of where everybody else was. It was on CD-ROM, so it was a natural for hospitals, right? Because you could have the data, keep it on site and everything. So.
And that was a world that you knew because at Maryland, I guess it was the School of Medicine that you were working with, or
School of Medicine. I think the best way to describe that is I learned how the sausage was made. And the truth of the matter is that for all sorts of political reasons, the School of Medicine really did not have access to much data at all. The level of data that they had access to consisted of printed listings of people who had gone to school there, with very limited information. Of course, it was paper, so it was all quite dated. The prospect research tools were limited to the people that were, had developed portfolios, et cetera. I was used more as a bird dog there, where I would just go out and, I'd talk to folks that had been at the school, ask them how they feel about the new dean, anything they have of interest. And that's how I made the transition.
Yeah. And then over at Target America, how was that transition for you to go from on the one side of bird dogging it, but obviously to raise that revenue to providing services? That was kind of early in the service cycle for the industry.
Yeah, it was, but not for me. I mean, because I'd been doing that in the state of. I was selling to Pennsylvania state government. So if you just give your moment a pause there, you can imagine the different layers that you have to go through and the certifications that you have to go through. So selling into hospitals during that time frame, and we were dominated by hospitals. We did extremely well with hospitals. I think we picked up maybe 200 of them, maybe, or 200 or 300. And they were, the nice part about it was it was recurring revenue, right? At that point, prospect research, you would do it once, you'd wait 5 years, hope that you could afford to do it again. And and I know that over time that began to shorten. That went from 5 years to 3 years to 2 years. And what we were delivering is something where you could do research every day. It wasn't an online thing, but it was a CD-ROM that had, I think it was probably 3 or 4 different databases that had been merged together. I mean, in hindsight, it's nowhere close to what we're doing nowadays. So,
and so that was kind of a transition point too, because you were there, I guess, for a while. That was almost
4 years.
Yeah. And then you moved over to WealthEngine, which is where we really got to know each other.
Yeah.
So how did that transition occur? It's ancient history now, so I'm trying to remember how that happened.
From Target America to WealthEngine?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We were doing really pretty well, and folks were starting to notice a bit. And my former business partner from WealthEngine came over to Target America and in hindsight, the setting was the person who actually owned Target America had at one point sued the guy that I was working for. This was his son-in-law coming in and saying, "Hey, you guys look like you know what you're doing. Why don't you resell our product?" And the guy I worked for, Jim McGee, who's passed on at this point, said, "No way in hell I'm going to do that." Just he would do it out of spite, the kind of guy he was. And I think a year later, well, I'm dating myself now. This is 1999. There was this, what do they call it? The tech boom, right? The big, there was a lot of private equity money flowing into tech. All you had to do was put .com or .net on the end of your name.
Right.
And, somebody would show up that would be willing to pay you $1 million for that. Well, Jim saw that as an opportunity, and he was right. He was out in the market, actively marketing it. And even though we had kept Target America very small, the folks that were looking to buy us seemingly couldn't remember my name. I can take a hint. I gave it 2 tries, and I thought, okay, this is not going to turn out. And then he presented me with a non-compete, which I hadn't had at that point. So I went to the guy that I had met, my former business partner at WealthEngine, and said, "Hey, and they weren't really making much of an impact in the industry. They'd gotten a couple things wrong. I said, let me be your CEO. And he said, well, I don't have a lot of money to pay you. I said, it's fine. We'll do it with stock. And he said, okay, well, I'll give you stock based on what you sell. And I said, that's okay. I had more or less lived on pure commissions for the previous 4 years with Target America. And we transferred over a lot of the things that we had learned while at Target America. And he did have better technology. And then we were able to kind of build out to the WealthEngine product. So we had to make some changes, in terms of pricing and strategies and the like. But overall, it was a very positive experience.
This is when it was power, I guess.
It was power all the way through the end. Ultimately, I did get stock, as you got stock as well. If you remember, the stock certificates said power on them. Power.
People of wealth and resources for the trivia. Yes, prospects of wealth and resources. Excuse me.
It's a good name, right?
Yeah, it is a good name.
Yeah. So, so I stuck around for a while. A couple years as CEO, a couple years when you got there. By that time, our former business partner wanted to be the CEO. I hung around for another couple of years to kind of protect the value of the stock. And you and I left at the same time. So it's your responsibility, Jack.
Well, I hope there's a silver lining in that story.
Of course there is. Things have turned out very well. And we've been afforded the opportunity to work together. What are we up to now? 10 years? 15?
Oh, no, longer than that, because if that happened, when was that? In 2008 that we sold our interest, I think?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Long time now. But you immediately got to work on the next thing. I mean, we were trying to pilot another project with a friend of ours, which didn't really fly. But then maybe a little ahead of its time, I'm not sure. But then
it was about a year behind.
Behind?
It was a year behind.
But it still took years for people to do it. So I don't know.
It's true. No, conceptually, it was an excellent idea. The technology platform was the problem. We put it on I'm sorry, you know this, I know this. We don't have to belabor it.
Well,
We,
with others who have no idea what we're talking about, what?
we I'll describe it. If you agree, then we'll proceed from there. There's a concept of when you go out and do a discovery call with a prospect, that, frankly, any kind of a call with a prospect, that you would have a call report that needed to get back into the CRM. And we thought we had devised just a very clever way of capturing that information. Is that true?
I think so. They could just make a call and file the whole thing, but getting people to actually commit to filing those reports, regardless of how easy they were or how inexpensive it was, that turned out to be kind of tough.
Yeah, it was. It was. It was. And then the Apple phone came along, and the technology we were on just didn't make any sense anymore.
Right, right, and that did happen pretty soon after.
Oh,
But you were already starting the next thing.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was concurrent. I beat in both at the time. So while I was at WealthEngine, I had access to a lot of data. And one of the things we did was one of the things I wanted to pursue was what variables that we had to offer were most predictive of people that were likely to give.
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest way to do that was to look at the ones that had given to our clients at that point and figure out what characteristics that they might have in common with people that had given to other nonprofits. So the good news is aside from having to stratify it a little bit, it was pretty clear. I think we came up with the 5, 6 markers of philanthropy. And it's still valid now. I mean, if you're doing major gift work, at this point, it's probably one of the single best ways of predicting that.
So what are those things that are so constant that are good predictors?
Well, they were defined by the data that we had. So real estate, at the time we did the research, if you had $2 million of real estate, it just kind of punched you up to a new level of wealth. And there was a disproportionate number of folks that, in hindsight, of course it did. It demonstrated that people had wealth, and those are often the people that are making the major gifts. Then we did the same thing for foundation trustees. It popped in a similar sort of way. In hindsight, it probably wasn't necessarily their individual gifts that were, kind of pointing to the fact that they were a good place to invest time. But knowing that somebody is the trustee of a foundation that can give to your cause and if they're engaged with you, that's a really logical place to invest time for major gift work. We did it with business data. Business data is a lot less precise, but the estimates of what people's sales revenues turned out to be a pretty good factor. If they had any sort of business affiliation, it edged them closer to being somebody that would make a gift. If even using these sort of rough cut numbers, if they had between 1 and 5, it would edge them a little bit closer. And if they were over 5, regardless of the position that they had, it began to be predictive. And in hindsight, of course, you're talking to people that are involved in businesses that hypothetically are successful, so they should be generating income or generating wealth. And then, well, the obvious one, but was probably the toughest to do, was charitable giving. Looking at annual reports, collecting that data, and then screening against that to see if you could match up to the prospect that was being evaluated and whether or not they had given elsewhere and at what level they had given. And again, in hindsight, it's like, duh, let's talk to people that are charitable already. And then let's see, the one that was most controversial turned out to be the political giving. I think you're giving me an opportunity to talk about that, Jack. That's very nice of you. I think it's unfortunate that APRA has chosen to say that, research shouldn't look at that information. But as it turns out, as soon as somebody starts giving politically, it starts to bump up in terms of the likelihood that they're going to be charitable. As soon as they start to make larger political gifts, which are smaller because it's a regulatory, in the past, it's been a regulatory environment, then the likelihood that they're going to be charitable goes up even higher. When you get to lifetime giving of like $5,000 politically, it's a dead-on marker for people that are going to have a high correlation to making larger gifts charitably. When you get to $10,000, the correlation is almost 100%. If you find somebody who's over the course of their lifetime given $10,000 or more politically, which is a very rich data set because it is a regulatory data set, public, it's almost 1-to-1. You're going to find that that person's made 5, 10, 20,000, $500,000, $1 million gifts. You ask why? Maybe there's a correlation between political giving and charitable giving, or the type of people that like to give politically also like to give charitably, or you could look at it as the kind of an ideal marker for wealth. Political giving is not tax deductible, but people still do it, and they're the idealist would tell you they're giving to causes that they care the most about. The cynic among us would say they're giving to people who can influence policy, which is going to suit them from a business or a personal perspective. Either way, you're turning over disposable income, and if it's only a measure of disposable income, it's an incredibly good measure of disposable income. Anyway. And then when you run into people that have given more than 10,000, it's just a matter of taking the time to either look them up in a charitable donor database, or just do a quick Google search or ChatGPT on it. They're typically very, very high profile folks.
And this is a pretty small population, really. I mean, people talk about the power of political donations, but they don't often talk about the percentage of people who make them. Do you have a sense about how small this universe is?
I think when we saw the thing about 10,000 and above, I think we went back and looked, and I think we were able to pull out something that's like less than, what was it? I think it was 1/10 of 1% of the population. And if you look at major givers, I think it correlates. You're not getting major gifts from 20% of the population or even the constituents. And it points to the same people. So
Right. And now politics seem to be infused in everything now. So I'm sure that even discussion this stuff must get kind of complicated with people. You just mentioned, APRA, for example, being concerned about some of these things in the past.
Yeah.
Anyway. So maybe this is a good point to just discuss research in general. I mean, you were talking about how you've applied some of the lessons and the interests that you had, the understanding you had of the landscape, and then pairing that with technology and how that ended up playing out, of course, in this world of development quite successfully, not just in the office, but also in these services. How has that changed, if at all, over the years? I mean, from the time that you started doing this kind of work with prospect research and fundraising to today?
There's been a steady decline in costs. You and I both were around where, to do a to do a search looking for political giving or real estate, back when there was only like those two data sets available, you could pay a couple bucks for each of those search. If you're doing it online, you could easily pay $10 for it. That's taken a steep drop over those past 25, 30 years to where if it was only real estate and SEC insider stuff, the profile would be considered incomplete without the business data, without the charitable giving data, without the foundation data. And now without the anecdotal information about what people have made known about themselves on, different social media platforms, that's a good profile nowadays. And if you do it without AI, you can do it for less than, you do it well less than a penny. Let's just leave it at that.
Versus a dollar.
Versus $1. Yeah,
Right.
or $10, right? Truthfully, you start adding a few more zeros on the front of that. That's closer to. I mean, at DonorSearch, we were doing 20 million a month. Even at a penny, that's still a lot of pennies. We weren't paying that kind of money. So what's happened now is that as you use the AI to, if you were to combine together the different data sets, and you'd go off and use AI to try to pull together the, sort of variety of narrative-based data sets, that'll probably get more expensive for a while. That might even go back up to $1. Certainly on a retail basis, and from a production perspective, I think maybe 10, 20 cents should cover it. It'll be interesting to see, and the profiles are much more complete. Going forward, I think there's going to be a real issue in terms of the power that's necessary to do the AI. Right now, my impression is it's very heavily subsidized, or it's soaking up bandwidth or power that was there but wasn't fully utilized. I think we're moving into a next stage where you're going to have to be willing to pay for it. I don't know how long that'll last. You don't know what types of energy sources people are going to come up with. I mean, there's lots of good prospects that were even more cost effective than what we have now. But that'll kind of determine where things go. You can still get a lot done with the profile that, costs less than 0.5 cent or 1/10 cent or 1/100 cent. But when you want to embellish it with narrative and you want it to write the story for you, those things are still more expensive right now.
Is that the expectation too? I mean, for people who are trying to raise money today for charity, and it's become really complicated, especially in the last half a year or so, are they expecting just pretty much everything? All the data sources you just talked about, how there were 4 back, I guess, back in the day at Target America. Now it must be at least 3 dozen plus databases, plus all the, and all the databases are much larger. This matching is much closer, but then, and the online services are much faster. But then you've also got all this AI layered, both the predictive and the generative. Is that the expectation of the consumer? Just give it all to us?
I think what's not resolved yet is how much is the right amount to give. And if there's more, how do you make that available? Maybe that's the premium product, or the premium service. But invariably, what was premium one day becomes the norm after that. Yeah, of course. I mean, if I'm a nonprofit and I have somebody that has appropriate skill sets, and I've asked them to do research on somebody that I have to go see. Let's say you're lucky and you have a whole day to put it together. So very often you're working with a junior person, or maybe you're working with a senior person. If they're going to do a complete profile themselves, it should take about an hour, maybe somewhere between an hour and 3 hours to aggregate it, pull it together, make it sense, and make a narrative so that but you can, for 25 cents, you can have the first draft done in a minute. I don't see how that doesn't become the norm.
Yeah.
If you think of your own interests, if you were, let's say Masterminds was a nonprofit, and you were out soliciting grant money, or you were out soliciting major gifts from people that you had found amongst your constituency. Do you really want to pay somebody $50 to put together the profile, and you have to wait a day? Or do you want it for a quarter and start reading it before you head out, right? Or, maybe give yourself 20 minutes to read it. I think that's where the it's not really worked out how much data folks want. I think what they want, just my guess, I don't think most of the technology is there yet, is they want the stuff that's relevant to their nonprofit and relevant to the visit. Let's say you're from Michigan, right? God forbid you should actually be talking to somebody who's from Michigan, right? That would give you common ground almost instantly. And if your mission is to promote communications in the nonprofit market, let's say they're a communications major. Now, all of a sudden, you just drag out those two pieces of data and put it in front of you. You've probably got about 40 or 50% of what you could likely end up talking about. You don't need to know that, they have husky dogs, that if you don't have a husky dog, if you know what I mean.
Or a mini horse.
Or a mini horse.
So where is if that's where we are, mini horses or not, where is it going?
Where's it going? Where's it going for who?
Well, I guess for the nonprofits out there, for the Masterminds 501c3.
I think nonprofits are going to be presented with more and more challenges to be better informed. I think kind of like, as computers went along, if you had a computer that could do X, Y, Z things, and the person you were talking to was interested in X, Y, Z, then you came across as being somebody they wanted to talk to, somebody they wanted to consider investing time with. The folks that show up ill prepared, I mean, it's always been the case. People that show up ill prepared, except for just dumb luck, it's very difficult for them to persist. I think the bar is going to continue to get set higher. I don't see that as a bad thing. I see it as a way that things could become a lot more efficient. Yeah, I don't see it as a bad thing. But I don't have a prospect researcher's job. I'm not running a nonprofit. I'm not a development officer. But I think if we're still gonna hang on to personal interaction between the development officer and the prospect, and other folks are putting things out that suggest that we don't. But if you are going to try to maintain that sort of time-consuming, one-on-one, looking for emotional intelligence, all that sort of thing, then you've got to show up better prepared.
Yeah.
So.
Well, now I want to ask you about where this has gone, and starting with the business as it was, and you started DonorSearch really, I guess, in your house, in your living room, and the basement, and all over the place. But it was really you and a couple of folks, and I guess then eventually your kids, right?
So you're not going to talk about your role and getting me started?
Well, you please say whatever you
So
whatever
for
you
those
wish.
that are listening, Jay was actively encouraging me to go out and buy a company that had put together. Jay understood and I understood the value of charitable giving information in that prospect identification role. And Jay was relentless. And ultimately, we did end up buying the company. Thank God she was willing to do buyer finance or seller financing. So yeah, that's how it got started. I mean, you understood what the basic rationale was. This is like wealth gets you this far, but philanthropic intent gets you further. And the two together, wow, it's a big deal.
Well,
So
that was I guess the work that they had done was pretty substantial, done by groups, I guess, largely of, at that time we used to use the term homemakers. I don't think people say that
oh
anymore.
yeah, yeah.
But hand keying very, very successfully, lots of data from annual reports. But you went from that, from what, a million or whatever records to 250 million records or something more than that?
It was actually 5 million records.
Oh, 5 million. Excuse me. I don't want to
But
undersell these.
I think you've overstated the condition they were in when we got them. If you want to profile the people that were collecting the data as homemakers, that's cool. But the lack of consistency between the output of one homemaker and another homemaker, and by definition, they were all part-timers.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of structure on the back end to say, no, the data's got to come in this way. That took us about a year or two to figure that out, to get that cleaned up. Yeah, then we just kind of started building in earnest. Didn't hurt that we had competition that we knew we had to keep up with. That made it pretty clear. And yeah, it turned out pretty well.
And that was just again, a few people in your house, then into the buildings in Marriottsville, and now is this 18 years?
Yes, it is, Jack.
So for those who don't know, what just happened to this thing that you built, the latest thing that you built?
DonorSearch was purchased by a good company, Evertrue, and it's a nice match. It's a real nice match. Evertrue has a history of working with larger nonprofits and providing additional capabilities outside the CRM, never competing with the CRM, and making the fundraiser's job a lot easier. Show me folks that have these characteristics, bring them up, prompt me for them, that sort of thing. And they, as a company, saw the wisdom in the the data that we had collected and the way we'd refined it into the products, and then especially what we were doing with AI. The stuff that we've been doing with predictive AI at the point, well, if we just go back a month or so, we were definitely leading the industry with it. We had worked with Chad Goebel and Nathan Chappelle, Scott Rosenkrantz, Amanda, and Chad was willing to let us hire these folks that already had a more than a basic understanding of AI. And when that got mixed together with the technology that we had and the sales and distribution systems that we had, it's worked out very well for folks. So Evertrue is going to take the two, put them together, and then just kind of make it even bigger and better.
What is it like for you to have that transition? Because this is, again, something you spent a lot of time, energy, sweat and tears, but also family building.
Yeah. Well, both Pat and Sarah have chosen to stay with the merged company, which that gives me a lot of reassurance. But they were the people that were related to me, but just as important, more important, because the numbers are greater, you have the rest of the infrastructure that we've put together. I had been looking for somebody who would try to keep the integrity of what we had built in place, i.e. not take it apart for the pieces. And Evertrue kind of fit that bill very nicely. So yeah, there are synergies at almost every aspect of the business, whether it be IT, whether it be marketing, whether it be sales, sales at a high level, sales at a medium level. Yourself, you're an excellent, what you do for DonorSearch to build out our brand in the market. Logically, it should expand to be able to do that with Evertrue. So yeah, things are good. Things are good. How do I feel about being retired? It's not as bad as I thought it might be.
Well, you said the word retired. I wasn't even sure if that was true, but that's okay. So that's what it is. But what does that look like for you?
It's very new. It's very, very new. I still have some obligations for the company. Mm-hmm. Not anywhere close to what I had before. So now I'm in the middle of a small horse farm, and I can do whatever I want, go wherever I want. So we traveled a little bit right out of the gate, which was fun. I think we'll do more of that. And then just sprucing the place up a little bit, Try to stay out of trouble.
Some increasingly small animals. But so if you were to look back over this, I know this is a snapshot in time, and if I asked you this question 5, 10, 15 years from now, your answer might be different. But if you were to look back at this, what gave you the most joy so far?
We were able to do good things and in the process to do well ourselves. I mean, we stuck with the clients. It was like, don't do it if it's not good for the client. Don't do it if the client doesn't say, yes, that's what I want to do. Don't promote it. Just stick with the stuff that works for them. And, the ideal is when they can tell you exactly how it worked for them. The ideal would be is they implemented it here, they measured it over there, and they were able to calculate this specific return. And we were a little slow at capturing that information. I mean, we didn't really start it until probably 2 or 3 years in earnest. And then doing it with video was absolutely key as well. That you don't have to feel bad about any of that. That's all good, right? Back to the values.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Jay.
Well, that's it for this episode of the PM Podcast. You can learn more about DonorSearch at DonorSearch.net. Our producer is Jack Frost, and our theme music is Moving Out, Moving In by Jay Taylor, and is provided courtesy of Epidemic Sound. If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe wherever you like to listen. Check out our sister shows, Frontlines of Social Good and How to Raise. And come back next weekend for another conversation with a leader in the world of social good. Until then, this is Jay Frost. Thanks for joining me.